This is a Reloop Buddy, and it's a product so interesting that I've had to flip the order that I do reviews. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Holland and this is the Reloop Buddy, a £200 beginner entry-level controller designed for use with Algorithm DJ. Now this controller can be used with a Mac or PC with Algorithm DJ or Virtual DJ, but thanks to that massive hole cut in the back of it to slot an iPad or a phone in, it is designed to be used with a mobile device. And thanks to NeuroMix only being available on Apple side of Algorithm's DJ app, it's primarily designed to be used with an iPad just like this. Now, the Reloop Buddy is a really interesting product, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and opinions on it now and then a full guide rather than the other way around like I usually do in a review. And the reason for that is because although this is a great piece of hardware and the Algorithm DJ app is a fantastically powerful bit of kit, the two, ironically, just don't work very well together. And what I mean by that is Algorithm DJ is evidently designed for use on an iPad with your finger. And everything's large, bulky, buttons are big and easy to press, and the entire system is designed to help you get along just using your physical finger as an input device. Now, when you attach a piece of hardware to that, like the Reloop Buddy, which is, it's compact, it's designed for use with this software, it's got all the features of the software, you're able to access them on the controller. The problem is the app doesn't change in any way to help the physical hardware. As I've said, this is a really good piece of hardware. I really like it, and this is a really good application. So I'm going to break down the controller now, show you all its features in depth and how to use it. So let's get into it. So here we have the Reloop Buddy plugged in to an iPad Pro. We've got the application launched, and it's as simple as just plugging it in and you're almost ready to go straight away. Now, before you do start with the Reloop Buddy, there's a few settings in Algorithm DJ that if you've not already played with a controller before, need changing to suit the controller. So if you tap on the top menu, go to settings, one of the first things you're going to want to do is go into general, and you're going to make sure that reset EQ is turned off. If you leave it on, your tempo faders and your EQ controls can become a bit confusing as the software resets them every time you load a track in, regardless or not if you've put the dial itself back into the center position. So make sure that's turned off. You want to make sure that invert tempo slider is turned on. This means that the track will speed up when you pull the fader down and slow down when you raise it up. That sometimes is turned off from default in Algorithm DJ. And normally these settings aren't just set when you plug the controller in, hence why I'm showing you them. So make sure that's set like that. Make sure your range also is between 8 and 10%. You don't want it any higher than that when you're using tempo faders as small as these. Under advanced, make sure that auto queuing, pre-queuing, the auto select is turned off. This is always turned on in Algorithm DJ as default, but we've got dedicated controls now to turn these on and off when we want to queue a track, so we don't want the software figuring that out for us. So make sure that's turned off. And then we're good to go. So this is the Reloop Buddy, and the first thing we want to do in any DJ situation is get some music loaded in. So in the center of the controller up top here, we have this big browse control. From anywhere in the software, when you twist this, it will take you straight into the library view. So you can just twist it, straight away you're taken into the library view. And here, as you can see, I'm turning the dial and nothing's happening because this is actually inside this area here that has no songs. So to get back onto the file finder here on the right hand side, you can press shift and press in, and then you are in this window here where we can enter into the Crossfader music pack. Then we can scroll down and find some songs. Now, if you would like to download this free music pack, it is free of charge. I'll have a card pop out in the top right hand corner, or you can check in the video description below for a link. So once you've found a track, you can load it to the deck by pressing either A or B on the bottom, One of the main selling points of Algorithm DJ is its amazing streaming capabilities. So you can access music from your personal iTunes if you've synced music over iTunes. You can use Tidal, SoundCloud Go, and Beatport Link as well. Do note, however, when you're using the dial on the screen, you can only go back to this section here. You can't use the control no matter how many times I press the back button by pressing shift. I can't go back and choose between, say, music that's locally stored and the Beatport link. You just can't go onto that section for some reason with the controller. It's a bit frustrating. When you are in this section here where the playlists are, if you've got the options at the bottom for to explore or see the trending tracks, you can access that by pressing shift and turning the dial. So you can go between the top 100 there, playlists, and explore, just like that. Again, you can use the button on the bottom to load tracks in, just like that. Once we've got tracks loaded in, it's time to get playing. So with the transport controls are found on the bottom of each deck just here. Now the controller is a mirrored layout, meaning that the tempo faders are in different positions per deck. But for once, I actually quite like this because it's such a small controller. It makes sure that we don't have a tempo fader over here, which would be very close to the volume fader and get in the way. So it is a mirrored design, but thankfully the transport controls, the cue and play button, they are identically placed on the left and right deck, which is great to see. We've got the cue button, obviously, that will place a cue down on the waveform. If you want to see an extended waveform, just tap in the middle here. Alternatively, you can use the 2-deck view if you like. For the review, though, I'm going to keep it in the classic view that people will be most familiar with. So you place a cue point down, and you can get each track playing here with the dedicated play pause button. Next to it, we've got a sync button, which can be turned on both decks, and then to turn it off, you can just press shift and sync to turn it back off as well. In the middle, we've got the crossfader, the settings of which can be changed in the algorithm software. So we change the crossfader curve. If we don't want it on a cut, we can have a linear fade. We can also invert it if you like to scratch in a hamster style, or alternatively, you can turn it off completely. The up faders are nice and long, give you plenty of travel here, which is great to see. And then to the right hand side and to the left, on the left hand deck, we have the pitch faders. Now the pitch faders are quite short, but they're very accurate, which is great to see. It is worth noting, however, that there is no dedicated key lock button on the controller itself. So it will pitch the track up and pitch it down when you change the speed. To change this and to enable key lock, you just need to find and press the little music icon next to the on-screen pitch faders. So that's how you change those. Just above the pitch faders, we've got our loop encoders. Now, loop encoders are great. They allow us to change the length of a loop and activate it. As you can see on the screen, there's a 4-beat loop. Selected at the moment, we can twist to the right to double this all the way up to 32 beats. And we can halve it all the way down to a 32 of a beat as well. So if you want, say, a 2-beat loop, I can just go to 2 and then press in to activate the loop. When you activated the loop, you can halve it by turning to the left or double it by turning to the right. And then to exit the loop, just press back in again. It is worth noting, however, that you cannot move the loop with the encoder. So on some softwares, when you're in a loop, you can press shift and turn to the right or left to move the active loop. You can't do that in Algorithm DJ, unfortunately. Just above the loop encoders, we've got the jog wheels. Now these are very small, but they are touch capacitive, which means you can scratch if you touch the top of them. So you can stop the track and scratch like that. You can even use the jog wheel to quickly scrub through a track. So by pressing shift and scrolling, you can see there, you get a little indication where it's going on the overview waveform. You can just move it around like that. So that's a really nice time-saving tip. The one thing I will say about these jog wheels is they're very shallow. So there's not much material on the side here to spin the jog wheel and not touch the top. So if you are beat matching with the jog wheel, you're going to want to be careful not to touch the top surface. I could have done with just being a bit deeper, just to give you a bit more material to grip onto. But that said, they work well. They've always been responsive throughout our testing. Moving into the middle of the mixer section, we've got our EQ controls up the top. Now do note, these are only a 2-band EQ, so we've only got low and high here. So what's really weird about this is that the high doesn't affect the mid whatsoever, meaning that if I turn down the low and the high at the same time, the mids stay playing through at full volume. So I can demonstrate this by opening up the mixer tab here. And you can see when I pull the low and the high down, the mids are still there. So it's a bit frustrating that, because if I get the track playing, you can still hear that track coming through. So you can never totally kill a track by using the EQ controls here. Underneath we do have a high pass, low pass filter. So if you sweep it to the right, you get a high pass filter. And then to the left you get a low pass filter. In the middle of the EQs, we can cue each track, and then our headphone controls are here on the right hand side with a volume and a dedicated mix control, so you can blend between what's cued and the master mix as well, which is really handy. If you press shift and press down on the headphone cue button, you activate Neural Mix. Now Neural Mix is the algorithm separation technology that's only found in the Apple versions of Algorithm DJ. So if you're on an iPad, iPhone or Mac, you can access this feature. This disables the EQ completely, so no longer will the EQ and the filter work. It will just reset to default. But now we have control over each element of the track. So Neural Mix will strip the track into 3 stems: drums, harmonics, which is basically instruments, and then your vocals as well. And then you can use the controls here to customize the amount of volume on each stem. So I can get the track playing, and I can take the drums out, so there's no drums whatsoever. I can take the harmonics out, which is the instruments, and I can take the vocal out, just like that. So this is really cool. You can get really creative with this. You can just create a cappella straight away. Alternatively, you can make an instrumental just by taking the acapella off. So having access to Neural Mix is great. You can just access it just by pressing that, and you can do this per deck. It does mean, however, you do lose control of the high pass, low pass filter and the EQs. So if you want to get in and tweak that sound whilst using Neural Mix, you're probably better off using the pad mode, which I'll show you in a bit. Underneath our EQs, we've got the effects section. Now the effects are using paddles to activate the effect, so you can push these up to lock an effect on. This will keep the effect running, or you can pull them towards you, which is a spring-loaded motion, just for momentary use. Now, I really like the use of paddles. They used to be exclusively only available on higher-end scratch battle DJ mixers. Seeing them work their way down to controllers like this is really, really good. It's just intuitive to use, it's really simple, and it's fun to do so as well. In the middle, we have a dry, wet control here, so that's basically how much the effect is applied. And then we have a dedicated left and right button, which will change the beat divisions. Now, the biggest problem with the effects section on this controller is, even though I can change parameters, I can change the beat divisions here, I can turn the effects on. As you can see, I can't see what's going on. There's nothing on the screen telling me what I'm doing. You can even press shift and use the left and right arrows to change what effect is applied. But again, you can't see it. It doesn't pop up on the screen for you to see, which is something I think it should do. It's very easy to accidentally get lost. It's almost like you're running blind with the effects. Now, you can open up the effects. To do so, you go onto the screen, you touch this little panel here to open up this section, then you go to effects here, and normally it will open up to effects pad. So then you have to go to manual, which is here. And now you can see that I can turn this effect on and off. It's an echo. There's the beat division here. Now the beat division doesn't tell you on the software what beat division you are actually changing. So it won't say 1 beat, it won't say half a beat. Something that has bugged me about Algorithm DJ for years now, but they haven't changed it yet. And of course, you can press shift, change the effect. But you do know that when you change the beat division, it changes both sides. So if I want a 1-beat echo on the left-hand deck and an 8-beat flanger on the right-hand deck, I can do that by manually moving on the screen the effects, but I can't then use these buttons as it changes both of them at the same time, which is a bit frustrating. I'd like to have seen that change, but it's not the end of the world. So now we've covered the majority of the basic controls on the Reloop Buddy, it's time to talk about the performance pads. Now we've got 8 RGB multicolored pads per deck. It's great to see RGB pads at this price point. Normally you don't get RGB pads even on controllers that are priced double this. So it's really nice to see. However, they are extremely dim. So if you're playing outdoors in direct sunlight, basically anytime you're not in a dark room, it can be difficult to see what's going on with the pads because they are very dim. That said, they are made out of a nice rubber material and they've got a nice positive action at the bottom of the click, so they do feel good. They are a little bit small, but on a controller this small, you can't complain. You will notice that above each set of pads, there's no performance pad mode buttons. We can't change what mode we're in like we traditionally would on a controller. Instead, we have a dedicated mode button at the bottom left-hand corner next to sync. And you can see underneath each pad is a label. So basically you press this, the pads all go red, we've got a green pad here, and we can change which mode we're in. So the first mode is hot cue. These are pretty simple. Everyone knows how hot cues work these days. It's nice that they're multicolored. And of course you can delete them back out by pressing shift and tapping on them again. Do note in Algorithm DJ, they are like a gate style hot cue. So when you press them, the track will only play as long as you keep your finger on the hot cue button. As soon as you let go, it stops and goes back to the cue point. The next pad mode is auto loop. So you press pad, press auto loop, and as you can see, there's no indication that I've changed mode. I only know I've changed mode when I actually press on a pad and it starts looping. Now, I would have liked the screen to have popped up and told me, you've changed mode, here's the information. It doesn't happen, unfortunately. It's one of the things that really winds me up about this controller. If I do want some information, I can get it. What you've got to do is you've got to press mode, and you've got to double tap the mode that you're entering. So auto loop, if I double tap it, the screen now pops up and displays the auto loop information for me on the left-hand side. So that's great. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, the top left-hand button on the screen is 2 beats long. So the top left pad must be 2 beats long. But it's not, it's a 16th. It doesn't make any sense. Of course, this is how the pads should be. It should go from 8, 4, 2, 1 beat, and then the top row should be half, quarter, eighth, 16th. That is how most pads are laid out on a DJ controller, so that's fine. But why is the app the wrong way around? It just doesn't feel intuitive, and it's a theme that sadly continues throughout the performance pad modes. So they're just auto loops that just do the same job as activating a loop up here on the encoder. Press the pad once, it activates a loop. Press it again and it leaves the loop. It's as simple as that. Moving on to the next pad mode, we've got touch effects. So touch effects, again, if I double tap the mode, it brings up the effects panel. Notice how it's still on the manual mode. It's not opened up the touch effects mode. Don't know why, a bit frustrating. But if I go and manually touch the screen, it brings up the pad modes, pad effects modes. Again, annoyingly, when I press on a pad mode, it doesn't light up on the screen what mode I've just pressed. So if I get this playing, you can see these all work, but there's no indication on screen which each of these modes are. So unless I build up some muscle memory and learn which pad mode is which, there's no way of knowing, there's no way of telling. So just to give you an idea of how they sound though. Like a dub echo with a low pass filter. This is like a dub echo with a high pass filter. That's a flanger. Bit crusher. That's like a vinyl breaker with a dub echo on it. That's a sensor mode, so that's playing the track backwards. Low pass filter and a high pass filter. It's just frustrating that it doesn't tell you on the screen what each one does, or even indicate that you're pressing one when you are. Moving on to the next mode, we've got sampler. Now, obviously, double tap it, it changes the waveform this time to the sampler here, and it's much the same story. Of course, this is a sampler. When I press it, it triggers an air horn, which plays at full volume. There's no sampler volume on the controller, so do be aware of that. But again, it's not lighting up on the screen which mode I've pressed. So if I go and press the snare, it presses it, but it doesn't light up. It's a bit of a shame. But moving on, next up we've got Slicer. Now if you double tap this, nothing happens. You don't get any information that you're in the slicer mode. So if I go back to the waveform view on here, just get rid of that, you'll see that nothing's changed. But the pads are changing colour now, so we've got the red moving across with the track that's playing. And when I press the slicer, it doesn't work like a slicer in any other DJ application, doesn't DJ? It just basically adds hot cues along the track. So you can jump around the waveform. But if I press and hold on most other DJ softwares, it will loop that segment that I pressed on. But this doesn't do it. Now you can make it become more of a traditional slicer by pressing the down arrow on the waveform, pressing slice, and now when I play, you'll see we've got the sections highlighting to which area is to the corresponding pad, which section of the waveform, which is more like a traditional slicer mode. Why this doesn't do it automatically when I enter slicer mode on the controller, I don't know. But again, if I press down and hold on it, it won't loop. So Slicer, it's just not very well implemented in Algorithm DJ, and I think it needs a bit of work. I really don't understand why I've manually got to go back in, turn Slicer back off here, or turn it on. It should just be from the controller. Doesn't make much sense. Next up, we've got Bounce Loop. Bounce Loop is the algorithm version of saying loop roll. So this will roll a track, you know, activate a loop, and it'll keep playing underneath, and then as soon as you let go, it'll jump back to that point in the track where it should be. If I press mode and double tap that, it brings up the bounce section here, as you can see. But again, as I've said before, it doesn't correspond on screen to what's going on with the pads, but it works. You can works well enough, just a bit frustrating that the screen doesn't tie up. Next up, we've got Neuro Mix. So this is really cool, actually. The Neuro Mix section is really, really cool. So basically, we've got 4 buttons along the top and 4 buttons underneath. And we've got 3 stems. We've got the drums, the harmonics, and the vocals. So if I get the track play, I'll just skip in. Pressing the top button will solo the drums. I can solo the harmonics with the next pad. And then the vocals as well. Pressing the pad underneath will turn that off and go back to playing the track as it was. Pressing the pad underneath on its own will give you a momentary like solo of that track, so it'll mute the other 2 and just give you a momentary like blip of that. And then on the right hand pad, this is really interesting. The right hand pad allows you to re-drum a track with one press of a pad. So what it'll do is it will automatically, when I press that pad, mute the drums playing on the currently playing track. It will start playing the other deck if it's not playing already. It will sync the other deck to the same tempo, and it will solo the drums on that track. So I get the drums from the right-hand deck playing on the left-hand deck's track. So to give you an idea of how that sounds, get the track playing, and if I press it, you can see it's got this track playing here. And it's just playing the drums from that track. So if I go over here, that's just drums. And on the left-hand deck, we've just got the harmonics and vocals. So with one press of a button, I've got a redrum instantly. And of course, pressing the pad underneath will just turn it off and put everything back to how it should be. So that is a really, really cool feature and something that I absolutely adore. I think that's really cool, and it allows you to get really creative with the system. And it's intuitive, and for once, what's shown on screen actually tallies up to what's going on with the pads. So it's nice to see it in that mode. Finally, we've got the looper. So when I double tap looper, you'll see that it's just brought up the sampler again. That's because the looper and the sampler live in the same area of the screen on Algorithm. Why it can't open up the looper is beyond me, but manually I'll go on the screen, I'll turn it over, and this is the looper. So we've got 8 loopers there. So basically this is a sequencer. Basically it'll play a loop in time with the tracks that are playing. So you can add more hi-hats, maybe some more kick drums, and it'll just perfectly in time sync up. So you'd expect these pads will turn on and off each one of these loops, but you'd be wrong. So if I press the top pad, it will get kicks 1 playing, which is fine. If I press the pad below, you'd expect it to play either FX1 or hats 1, but it doesn't. It changes it to kicks 2. And it's the same story across all the pads. So basically the top 4 sections you can activate. I can get the claps going, I can get the hi-hats going, and I can get the bass going. But the pads underneath don't control the bottom 4 loops. They just change the top 4 to a second version. So bass 2, hats 2, snare 2, and kicks 2. So the only way to access the other 4 is to use my hand. Again, if I wanted to use my hand to DJ with Algorithm DJ, I wouldn't have invested £200 in a controller. So it's just little things like that that are a bit frustrating about this controller. It's a great bit of kit, but you shouldn't have to start using your hand on the screen. It should be more intuitive. Things should just lay out as they are on the controller itself. So you don't have to keep glancing and wondering where you are. Because as you can see on my screen right now, it's a bit messy. I can't see my waveforms. It's all got a bit too much. And I think that's where this system just kind of falls apart. And there we go, there's our thoughts on the Reloop Buddy. As I said in the beginning, most of the faults and problems I personally have with this controller and software is in the software, and hopefully we might see that change in the future, in which case this is a superb little controller, especially at this price point. There are our thoughts. Let us know yours in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in another video sometime soon.